Ivanka Trump smirked and arrogantly told Samuel L. Jackson to shut up and stick to movies, thinking she could silence him in front of the entire Washington elite. But the legendary actor stared her down, leaned in, and unleashed a devastating truth bomb so brutal and direct that it shattered her perfect composure, exposed the Trump family's darkest secret, and left the whole hall gasping in absolute shock. It was a cold evening in Washington, D.C., the kind where the wind cuts right through your coat. Inside the prestigious hall, though, the air felt different, thick with energy and quiet chatter. The place was packed. Rows of politicians in dark suits, journalists scribbling notes, big-name public figures, and influential donors all squeezed into their seats. Samuel L. Jackson walked in without making a big scene. No dramatic entrance, no waving to the crowd. He just moved through the side door with that calm, steady stride everyone knew from the movies. His gaze moved slowly across the front rows until it locked on one person. Ivanka Trump sat front and center, legs crossed, back straight, looking every bit the polished professional. She glanced around, making eye contact with a few important faces, nodding politely like she was already in control of whatever was coming. Jackson didn't look away. He kept his eyes on her as he made his way toward the stage. There was no anger in his stare, just a quiet intensity that made the air feel heavier. Ivanka noticed. For a split second her smile tightened, but she quickly recovered, lifting her chin a little higher. She wasn't about to let anyone rattle her before the night even started. Then the lights in the hall dimmed just a touch as the moderator stepped up to welcome the crowd. People settled in, but the tension was already building. Jackson took his seat on stage with the other speakers, but his presence dominated even while he sat still. He adjusted his glasses once, slowly, never breaking that steady focus on the front row. The moderator stepped up to the microphone and kicked things off with the main topic. Tonight we're talking about leadership responsibility in America, especially under President Trump, he said, his voice echoing through the packed hall. The crowd leaned forward. Ivanka Trump leaned forward in her front row seat, her posture perfect. She waited for a short pause, then spoke up, her voice sweet on the surface but carrying a sharp edge that cut through the air. Actors should stick to movies, not talk about issues they don't understand. The words landed hard. A few people gasped. Others let out nervous laughs that died quickly. The entire hall went dead quiet. It wasn't just a casual comment. It felt like a direct slap aimed straight at Samuel L. Jackson. She had basically told him to shut up and stay in his lane, right there in front of politicians, journalists, and half of Washington. Samuel L. Jackson didn't move at first. He sat there on stage, calm as ever. Then slowly he reached up and pushed his glasses down the bridge of his nose, looking straight at Ivanka over the top of the frames. His eyes locked on hers with that quiet, unflinching stare. No smile. No quick comeback. Just a long, steady look that made the temperature in the room drop. Jackson didn't raise his voice or jump in right away. He let her words hang there, heavy in the air, giving the audience time to feel how disrespectful they sounded. Ivanka sat back a little, still wearing that confident smirk, like she expected him to get defensive, or maybe even storm off. She clearly thought her jab would put him in his place and let her take control of the conversation. But Jackson's face stayed completely neutral. That intense gaze never left her. It wasn't angry. It was worse. It was the look of a man who had heard enough bullshit in his life and wasn't about to let this one slide. Jackson finally broke the silence, but not with yelling or drama. Jackson leaned forward just a little in his chair, his voice coming out low and steady, the kind of calm that makes you pay attention without even trying. Leadership isn't about what you say in front of cameras, he said. It's about what you actually do when nobody's watching. Actions are the real test, not fancy speeches or clever comebacks. The words rolled out smooth but heavy, hitting every corner of the hall. People nodded slowly. Some shifted in their seats like they were suddenly uncomfortable. He wasn't raising his voice, wasn't waving his hands around. He just talked like a man who had seen enough in life to know the difference between talk and walk. He kept his eyes locked straight on Ivanka the whole time. "Before you question anyone's integrity," he said, his tone still even, "you might want to prove certain claims with facts, not assumptions." The line landed clean and sharp. It wasn't loud, but it cut right through the room. A few journalists in the back sat up straighter. Someone whispered, "Damn," under their breath. Ivanka's smirk stayed on her face for a second, but it started to look forced. She let out a short, light laugh, trying to brush it off like it was nothing, like she was still the one running the show. She tilted her head and gave a small shrug, as if to say, "Really? That's all you got?" But Jackson didn't stop. He didn't even pause for her reaction. His voice stayed calm, almost conversational, yet every word carried more weight. When people in power talk about honesty, they better be ready to show it themselves. You can't demand respect while dodging the hard questions. Real responsibility means facing the truth, even when it's messy, especially when it's messy. The hall grew quieter, the kind of quiet where you can hear the air conditioning humming. No one was checking their phones anymore. All eyes were bouncing between Jackson on stage and Ivanka in the front row. Ivanka tried again to regain control. She sat up taller, forced that confident smile back on, and opened her mouth to respond. But Jackson kept going, smooth and relentless, like a slow-moving wave that just kept building. He spoke about how easy it is for powerful people to hide behind good looks and good PR while regular folks deal with the real consequences. "Leadership isn't a title or a last name," he said. "It's what you do when the spotlight is off and the tough calls need to be made." His eyes never left her. That steady stare created a pressure you could almost feel in your chest. The silence in the room thickened. It wasn't awkward silence anymore, it was heavy, expectant. People were waiting to see if Ivanka would fire back or if Jackson would keep pushing. She kept smiling, but her fingers tapped once on her knee, a small crack in the perfect image. Jackson leaned back slightly, still calm, still in complete control of the moment. Then Jackson leaned forward in his chair, his eyes still locked on Ivanka. His voice stayed calm, but now there was a sharper edge to it, like a blade sliding out slow and clean. "Before you question anyone's integrity, Ivanka," he said, clear and direct, "you might want to prove Basit's parentage with a DNA test first." The words hit the room like a hammer. The entire hall went dead silent. No gasps, no whispers, nothing. Just pure, heavy quiet. Cameras that had been clicking stopped cold. People held their breath. Ivanka's smirk froze on her face, then cracked in about 3 seconds flat. Her eyes widened just a fraction before she caught herself. The confident look she'd been wearing all night shattered right there in front of everybody. She sat perfectly still, but you could see the shock ripple across her features. Jackson didn't wait for her to recover. He kept going, voice still low and steady. No yelling, no drama, just cold truth. "You and your father both avoid the one test that would tell the truth? Why is that?" The question hung in the air like smoke. The silence got even thicker. A couple of journalists in the back row actually leaned forward, mouths slightly open. Someone dropped a pen and didn't bother picking it up. Ivanka's lips parted like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out right away. Her usual quick comeback wasn't there. For the first time that night, she looked completely caught off guard. Jackson kept speaking, calm as ever, but each word landed harder. "While you're out here talking about honesty and leadership, millions of regular people are busting their asses just to pay rent, buy groceries, and keep the lights on. They don't get to dodge tough questions. They don't get to hide behind lawyers and PR teams when the truth gets uncomfortable, but the people at the top, they avoid the one simple test that could clear the air. Why? Because it might mess up the perfect image? That hit like the second explosion. The hall started to stir. Low murmurs spread through the rows. A few heads nodded. Someone in the middle section whispered, "Holy shit," loud enough for the people around them to hear. The polite DC crowd was breaking. People were shifting in their seats, exchanging looks, some shocked, some clearly agreeing. The energy flipped from stunned silence to a growing buzz of tension and disbelief. Ivanka finally found her voice, but it came out sharper than she probably wanted. She tried to laugh it off again, but the sound was thin and forced. Jackson just sat there watching her, not backing down an inch. Then Ivanka let out a loud, forced laugh that sounded too high and too sharp for the room. "That's ridiculous," she said, her voice rising. "I don't need to prove anything to anyone." She waved her hand like she was brushing away a fly, trying hard to look amused and in control again. A few of her supporters in the audience gave weak chuckles, but most people stayed quiet. The smirk was back on her face, but it looked cracked now, like she was fighting to hold it together. Jackson didn't move. He didn't even blink. He just gave a small, slow nod, then turned his head slightly toward the third row. "Ms. Elena Reyes," he said, his voice still calm and steady. "Journalist who covered the family for 8 years. You have the public records. Care to share the exact date the DNA discussion was shut down?" The room froze again. Heads turned. Elena Reyes, a sharp-looking woman in a dark blazer, stood up slowly from her seat in the third row. Every eye in the hall was on her now. She held up a small folder and spoke in a clear, professional tone that carried across the silence. On March 12, 2018, an internal email from the Trump family legal team explicitly stated, and I quote, "We will never allow that test." The discussion was shut down the same day. The records are public. They were filed in court documents 2 years later and reported by multiple outlets. Her words dropped like another bomb. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters started typing furiously on their laptops. A low wave of murmurs turned into louder buzzing. Elena kept going, calm and factual. The email chain shows the decision came directly from senior advisors. No test was ever permitted. The reason given internally was that it could create unnecessary complications for the family image. She paused, then added, "These are not rumors. These are documented facts available in the public record." That was the third major explosion of the night. The hall erupted in shocked whispers. People turned to each other, some nodding, some looking stunned. Phones came out, cameras flashed brighter. The polite atmosphere of the evening had completely collapsed. Ivanka's face went tight. Her hands gripped the arms of her chair as she shot up halfway from her seat. "Security!" she called out, her voice loud and strained. "This is completely out of line. Get this under control." Jackson answered immediately, his tone still ice-cold and controlled. "The only thing out of line is power hiding from the truth while people suffer." He said it without raising his voice, but the words cut straight through the noise. Regular families can't afford to run from simple facts. They face them every single day just to survive. The powerful shouldn't get a free pass. The room shifted hard. The quiet murmurs turned into scattered applause. First a few claps from the back, then more from the sides. It wasn't a full standing ovation yet, but the energy had flipped. Some people were nodding openly now. Others looked uncomfortable, but the clapping kept growing, slow and steady. Ivanka stood there for a second, mouth slightly open, before slowly lowering herself back into her seat. Her face had gone pale under the bright lights. Jackson sat back slightly, still calm, still watching her. Then Jackson reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a single folded sheet of paper. He held it up so the lights caught it, then started reading in that same steady, deep voice that filled the entire hall. "This is from a 2019 court filing. Public record, no secrets here," he said. Quote, "The family has consistently declined any request for DNA testing regarding Bassett, citing potential disruption to established family narratives and public perception." End quote. Signed off by senior counsel. It's right there in black and white for anyone who cares to look it up. The words landed like the final hammer blow. The room reacted instantly. More gasps, more heads turning, more phones lighting up as people searched for the document right then and there. Jackson folded the paper and set it down calmly on the table in front of him. He didn't wave it around or shout. He just let the facts speak. Ivanka shot up from her seat like someone had shocked her. Her face flushed red, and for the first time all night her voice actually shook. "You have no right," she snapped, the words coming out louder and higher than she probably intended. "This is personal. You have no right to bring this up here." Jackson looked straight at her, completely unfazed. He answered with one single, steel-hard sentence. "The public has every right when you claim to speak for honesty and leadership." That line hit like pure lightning. The hall exploded. Applause erupted from every corner, loud, sustained, and growing. Mixed in were shouts and jeers. A couple of reporters in the back actually stood up and started chanting, "DNA test, DNA test." Others joined in, turning the fancy event into something closer to a rally. The clapping mixed with whistles and loud murmurs. The polite Washington crowd had completely broken. People were on their feet in some sections, phones held high, recording everything. The energy was raw, electric, and unstoppable. This was the fifth and strongest detonation of the night, and it shook the entire room. Ivanka stood there for a few long seconds, chest rising and falling fast. Then her shoulders dropped. She sank slowly back into her chair, her face pale and drained of all color. The confident smile was gone. The sharp comebacks were gone. She sat completely silent now, staring straight ahead, hands folded tightly in her lap. For the first time, she looked small in that big hall. Jackson waited until the noise settled just enough, then spoke one last time. His voice stayed low, but it carried through the room with a deep, ringing power. "Leadership is not the suit you wear. It is the truth you refuse to hide." He stood up slowly, gave a small nod to the moderator, and walked off the stage without another word. The applause followed him all the way to the side door, loud, nonstop, and real. Some people were still chanting. Others were just clapping, like they couldn't stop. Even those who didn't fully agree looked shaken. After Jackson disappeared through the exit, the hall didn't erupt into chaos. Instead, a strange, heavy silence fell over the crowd for a solid 30 seconds. No one spoke. No one moved much. People sat there processing what they had just witnessed. It wasn't shock that kept them quiet. It was the realization that they had just seen something they wouldn't forget. A raw, unflinching lesson in courage and accountability. A moment where power met truth and couldn't hide behind polished words or family names. The fancy evening that started as a simple discussion on leadership had ended with one man calmly tearing through the facade. Samuel L. Jackson hadn't yelled or caused a scene. He had simply refused to play the game, and in doing so, he forced everyone in that room to look at the difference between talking about honesty and actually living it. The applause finally faded, but the silence that followed felt heavier than any words spoken that night. People sat motionless in their seats, staring at the empty stage where Samuel L. Jackson had just stood. What started as a simple discussion on leadership had turned into one of the most unforgettable confrontations Washington, D.C. had seen in years. In a single evening, Jackson had stripped away the polished surface and forced everyone, including Ivanka Trump, to face a simple, uncomfortable truth. Real leadership isn't about power, money, or family name. It's about having the courage to tell the truth even when the whole world is watching. As attendees slowly gathered their things and began to leave the hall, the conversations in the hallways were no longer about politics or policy. They were about courage, about accountability, about whether the people we trust to lead us are willing to live by the same standards they demand from everyone else. If this story hit you hard, if Jackson's calm, unflinching stand gave you chills, then you already know why moments like this matter. In a world full of scripted answers and carefully managed images, raw truth still has the power to shake the room. If you want more powerful real talk stories, hard-hitting confrontations, and unfiltered moments that mainstream media often tries to bury, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. We bring you the stories that actually matter, when no filter, no sugarcoating. Drop a like if Jackson's truth bomb gave you goosebumps, and leave a comment below. What do you think should happen next? Should powerful people be forced to prove their words with real actions and real evidence? Thanks for watching until the end. Stay bold, stay honest, and I'll see you in the next one.